So thanks, Tim and Samantha. And so like Tim said, my name is Stella Karsnick. I'm with WSP, and how we came in contact with Tim to do this is, we do some stormwater inspections, and one of them happened to be in Hamilton Township. But gonna also touch, the reason the title is MS4 permit and stormwater infrastructure info session is, we're not just gonna talk about what US basin owner can do to maintain. We're just gonna give you a little bit of background about the MS4 and like what it means, but not too much, because it's kind of more directed at the municipality. But okay, so the DEP, the reason that this is kind of amping up a little is the DEP has just updated the MS4 permit for NJ municipalities, and this is something that the municipalities are required to do by law, and it comes from the Clean Water Act. Don't want to spend too much time on this because, like I said, it's kind of more related to the municipalities' responsibilities, but basically stormwater is a pollutant, and it's like one of the last frontiers of pollution. And here in New Jersey, we're very dense and developed, so this is like a pretty serious issue in New Jersey with flooding and pollution. We are, we can't really swim in anything, we can't really fish that much compared to like some less developed places because of the pollution. So not going to get too deep into this either, just kind of to show you that the township will eventually have to do this, the watershed improvement plan. And like I'm showing the waterways that Hamilton generally drains to, and these are the watersheds. And like I said, doesn't really apply super to each individual, condo owner or business owner, but what you do affects like the township's final outfalls cleanliness levels. So that's why this is all coming up, and they're asking you to do this maintenance, and that's like the bigger picture of what is going on here. And then I'll add one more thing that the MS4 also is trying to do is collect all of this stormwater infrastructure. So they're going way more into detail. Like I don't want to mention every single one, but they're trying to compile, the state of New Jersey is trying to compile all of this stuff. And it's a lot, there's a lot of culverts, there's a lot of everything. And most likely you're here because you have a basin, but like you might have all these other things too. And the DEP is collecting that information. So just some quick slides to kind of show you what that web page looks like. And you as a business owner, you probably, or any type of property owner, you don't really have to be involved in this that much, but this is where it will all eventually go towards, is like a comprehensive mapping of all these things. And the DEP has resources to do this they're going to help municipalities do this with like lending material and licenses. By materials, I mean like the Trimble GPS tracker and stuff like that. But this is just background information. Don't need to do too much with this. And we'll get right in it. What is the purpose of BMP? The word BMP is used to describe all of these things that help meet these requirements set forth by the DEP and their best management practices. It's kind of like a weird acronym, but basically it's like anything like a basin, green infrastructure, all these things, they're referred to by this term BMP. And the three big things that we design for is quality, quantity, and recharge. Quality is the thing everyone thinks of when they think of pollution. It's like dirt. In general, pollution is actually usually like not the type of pollution you think of, like factory, like spewing pollution, but this type of pollution is like this, sediments and things from the roadway. That's the pollution here. The quality is actually kind of like one of the biggest issues in New Jersey because we flood a lot. Quantity is just like the peak flow, like after you develop land, the runoff comes, it doesn't get to seep in. So recharge is a factor too, but doesn't really get to seep in, and it doesn't get slowed down by the grass and the plants anymore. It's just like rocketing across the pavement. That's quantity. Quantity is like, as you develop, just the water goes super fast and it like causes a lot of downstream impact. So we mitigate quantity, quality, and recharge. Last thing is temperature actually does change too when you develop, but it's not something we design for. It's just something to note that the water does also get hotter from being in like urbanized areas. And this is like the most important slide. If you take anything away from this, I would say just like this slide. If you're private basin owner. And this is kind of one of the things I think Tim and Sam were trying to, as part of their public outreach, is, you know, like, what can you do to keep your basins better maintained? And I know there's like a gap of like, what is a basin, all these things, and that's what we're going to try to teach in this thing. But I wanted to just give these 6 simple steps that you could do like on your own to kind of keep things in good working order. What do they say? A pound of prevention is worth, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the very first thing, if you can find any of these things, as-built are like blueprints, anything like, if you have a drawing of when your development was made and the basins, that's going to be super, super helpful. But I know that that's not always available. But if you have it, awesome, definitely get it. If you have old inspection reports or old operation and maintenance manuals, super, super helpful. Anything you can gather up. And then step number 2 is obviously like really important. Take a walk around and see what you have. So you're on the property all the time. So any observations you make are important and very helpful. And sometimes it is just like what you would see with your own naked eye. You don't need that much like knowledge to figure certain things out. So take those 2, you know, go out with your printed out maps, or maybe you have it on your phone, whatever. And then the third step is, since you're on the property all the time versus like an engineer or whatever, go out when it's dry and go out right after it rains. And you can also go out in the rain, but see what's happening like at different times, because sometimes you'll hear a report like, well, it flooded so much, and then you don't know when that was, so you can't tie it back to anything. You don't know like what type of rainstorm it is. So, you know, especially after like a little storm is very helpful. You can see if there's ponding, like, you know, these are all helpful things to see. When it's like a huge downpour, seeing like water in the gutter doesn't really tell you that much. But if it's the next day and it's sunny and dry and there's like puddles, you know, that's very indicative, and that will help you a lot. And we'll get into like a few more things about that. But another thing is, a lot of things are designed to be dry after 72 hours. So, you know, if you first day after the storm, the second and the third, then you pick up a lot of information that would be useful. This 4th one's like a little tricky, is potential offsite features impacting your site. You may not really be able to know that much about it, but like I have seen properties where they have like a huge creek right behind them, you know, and their basin is like draining to the creek. That's important. You know, anything like that, rivers, ponds, lakes, wetlands, like anything that's kind of unique and maybe right before you or after you in the chain of water. And this is probably if I can give you one thing to empower you, is just like, is there anything that just jumps out at you, like simple maintenance that could be done by a maintenance person or a landscaper? So that's usually like mowing, things with plants, and things with cleaning, like litter. Anyone can look at litter and know that it shouldn't be there. It's not, and you might not think about how it affects the drains and stuff, but it does affect the drains. So, and the last step is like, if you're seeing something kind of like you're really confused about or whatever, then, you know, that might require more intense, like you might have to contact the township, you might have to contact other people, but just start with whatever you can do by yourself. And this is the majority of what the inspection list is covering is above at-grade basins. Like, so the majority of the people, I guess, attending this, like, this is what you have probably. And just to explain to you what it does is the basin, you know, the water flows into the basin and then it kind of gets like stopped like a bathtub and slowed down and let out more slowly. And then when I was talking about the quantity thing, that's the quantity of water. It's like, instead of just flooding a river with like all this development, you know, runoff, the river's getting it like trickled out so it can handle it better. And it's not always a river. I just mean like, generally speaking, the final outfall. And it also sometimes helps infiltrate the water back in. The final point is it always goes to a storm sewer or a waterway. It could go to a lot of different points, but for simplicity, like let's say, you know, waterway. And there's 2 types, generally speaking. And again, the basin checklist kind of more points to like generally dry basins, but wet basins are a possibility, and you'll see some pictures of those coming up, and you might have one of them. You might think it's like a pond. So like if you just look at it, you might not think anything about it except, oh, that's a pond. And a wetland's another example. I'll show you one of those, but they're like not exactly as matched up to the standard checklist, but a lot of the stuff is the same. And dry basin falls into like bioretention, detention, and I threw in swales because they're kind of like this exact same thing, just shaped different, basically. Not 100%, but they're kind of like the same concept. You know, water's going in, getting held back, cleaned, whatever, and being let out is like the general concept. And there's grass basins, there's vegetated basins. And another way you could miss a basin, not even know you have it, is if it's vegetated heavily with trees. You might not even like see it because you might miss the grading. You know, you're just looking at the trees. The most common type of basins like that are like in a roadway, like an infield, is like how you could miss that it's graded. Anyway, I picked this picture. This is an inspection I did a while back, and it was just like, I felt like it was a really good example of just like a very straightforward detention basin. I'll talk about all these different parts, but just like I felt like this one was pretty good. It's an office complex. You know, this might be what a lot of people have, something like this. And I'll talk about like these little things later, but I'll just point out something real quick. This is the outlet control structure. You're going to hear that pop up, and it's going to be on your checklist. That's a low flow channel. And, you know, this is a basin, and see how one side's a wall and one side's like land. So you might have different combinations of these things. And, oh, sorry, that's a pipe. It's an inflow pipe. So a wet pond or wet basin is different, but again, similar in concept. Like I said, you might not identify it. This is TCNJ. This is right in front of there. And I just grabbed this off Google Maps, and I wanted to show you another thing you could do if you don't have a map. You know, you could look at it in Google Maps and like take a screenshot and kind of mark stuff up. If you don't have resources like mapping or as-built, whatever, you can kind of get a good idea from looking at an aerial. And yeah, we'll go into like more of the details, but I just wanted to show you what they look like from above and from the side. And this is a wetland BMP. These aren't very common. I would say detention basin is like probably the most standard thing, but you could have anything. But just trying to show you some pictures of different things. Swales. Sorry, this picture is kind of horrible. And this is a very not well kept one. But you see how it's like graded, but it's not as big as a basin. That's kind of one of the major differences. Swales also don't always have outlet control structures, but you want to keep these maintained too. And this, I'm going to pause here and say that they're underground detention basins. And this is a tricky thing because you could totally miss that you have one of these, but I really hope that you know if you have this or an MTD. And I'm just going to flip through the pictures back and forth a little bit. So the reason you could miss it is you could be walking around on the pavement and just see like the manhole cover and the inlet and not know that there's like this whole system here. In general, I would think you would know if you had one because they need more maintenance. Like they need pretty regular maintenance, and you need to be like inspecting them. So if you're not, time could have already passed where it needs maintenance. But they're not so easy to see just, you know, like looking on Google Maps or something, you know? So this is like one of those things you really kind of got to know if you have. And that's what I'll say about that. And you need to be maintaining them. And the maintenance is not the same as all that maintenance in the checklist. It's like you need to, the closest you could come to maintaining them yourself probably is like crowbarring the top off and like maybe shop vacuuming it if it's like the right type, like this type. But if it's like a filtered one, it's going to be more intensive than that. And I'll just show you this. That's like one that, you know, by like potentially if you were in the habit of maintaining it yourself, I would definitely go to the manufacturer's instructions and stuff. You know, you gotta be careful with these. A little more complicated. And yeah, so we're gonna just hop into the inspection report that Tim provided to everyone. And just, I'm not gonna like read off every single thing, but like, you know, fill out this part. And then, like I said, you might wanna circle back at the end and figure out this stuff. And some of the stuff you might be able to figure out on Google Earth. After you know what an inlet is or an outlet, you'll be able to identify them better. And then I'll just throw in one more thing, not that you can't hire people to do things, whatever, but I mean, there's so much information now with Google and stuff. You can Google a lot of these terms if you're having trouble, like I was saying, like immediately identifying, like, oh man, I need to get someone out here to fix this. You can look up a lot of these terms and it's pretty helpful for learning about it. So we'll get right into it now. So, like I said, not going to read off like every single thing, but I picked this picture for like an example of like looking at an image online might be able to help you check a box or figure out what your problem is. So like the top picture is a sinkhole, but the bottom picture is an animal burrow. So like if you had one or the other, you could like Google a bunch of pictures and kind of like maybe get to a better idea of like how serious your problem is. And I mean, with the sinkhole too, you can also like, you could stand on it, you might sense some instability. I showed you the low flow channel. Unauthorized or malfunctioning structures would be like a little tricky to identify just off the top, but you know, something that's, especially if it's not on an as-built, or it just seems really like not like you, maybe you didn't do it, maybe someone's like on your property. There's, you know, a lot of potential different things could happen there. And is there standing water, evidence of standing water? That's important. And we were talking about with the wet or dry. So like if you go out and it's like the dead of summer, you know, and it hasn't rained and there's just like water and it's not meant to be wet, something could be like not draining properly, or like you could have siltation, you could have like some type of issue that's causing a drainage issue. And then there's just more obvious things like fencing, you know, I don't think that's pretty self-explanatory. And back to the standing water, the reason that, so one of the signs could be like the ground cover is starting to go away. It should be grassed and now it's, you know, the grass is dying from being like inundated. And then the opposite is also true. You can have vegetation that grows up. These are the Phragmites, you know, like wetland plant. If there's just like tons everywhere and it wasn't really meant to be like that, something's not draining. And New Jersey requires 72-hour drain time. So again, with the summer example, like in the dead of summer, if there's thick, like a ton of water somewhere and it's just like hasn't rained in a while, you're going to get mosquitoes. That's part of the reason why the rule exists. And then I'm just bringing in some more photos so you can see stuff that's like pretty obvious maintenance, like easy maintenance you could do. This clogged channel, like all you have to do is, you know, get that stuff out. And then the concrete low fill channel being filled with like the lawn clippings, it's like something that, you know, then if you notice something like that, you can start to be more careful with your maintenance and, you know, kind of prevent that. And then here's an example of one that was like really good. It was actually the same basin. And that stone is like really uniform and like thick. And then that stone laid down with the mesh is really good. It's gabion wall. You don't often see them in basins. Usually it's just like the stone laid down, but it's super, you could tell they just maintained it and they did a good job. So just kind of showing you different examples. Now the inlets is where the water comes in. Inlet can also refer to like the catch basin on the side of the road. So just like that word's kind of interchangeable in New Jersey, but in this situation, you're talking about like the pipes going in. So major things is like, is the pipe broken? Sediment accumulation. It's the same kind of question for like the inlet itself or like the whole basin. So that question, you know, the erosion and sediment can be like the whole basin has tons of it, or it could just be like at the outfall of the inlet, outfall of the water, you're getting like a lot of sediment. It can mean many different things, and I'll show you different pictures towards the end, but like you could have a situation where something upstream, like one of your catch basins is right near a lot of dirt. So it can be a lot of different ways that this can happen. And then erosion is like what I was, you know, with these rocks, these prevent erosion. So if you have a lot of erosion, you can usually lay down stone to like prevent that problem. And vegetation is funny because like it's kind of almost a sign that it's working, but there is a point where there's too much vegetation and it's like choking out the outfall, the inlet to the basin. So this is a really extreme example of like erosion, but I just threw it in there. I saw this in Florida. This is like pretty intense, you know, and like what's going to happen here is wherever this pipe is accepting all of this, wherever it, you know, sends out its water to and discharges to, there's going to be like a ton of sand. So erosion, sedimentation, they all kind of play together at different points. And the basin, this is a question about just like the basin itself. Number 4 would kind of look like this. So like extreme, it's saying eroding, slumping, and then I showed you a photo of like animal burrows. Number 2, it's the same. It's erosion and exposed dirt or earth. They're like one and the same, anywhere where kind of like you see grass and then, in this spot here, it's like the grass is dead. Well, the grass is dead and then it's wet. That means the water's sitting there. But the opposite is also true. Like the water could be flowing really quickly past and it's not secured with like stone or vegetation. So like that situation is an erosive situation. And this was like another photo I had from, this wasn't actually a basin inspection, so I didn't know what type of basin this should be, but this could go either way. It could be that it's not draining, or it could be the opposite. It could be an infiltration basin that's overgrown. Infiltration basins are supposed to have a layer of sand. I will say in the whole time that I've done inspections, I don't know if I've ever seen just like a freshly done one that's like super well maintained. So I will say it's common. And a lot of these stormwater things, certain maintenance issues, you kind of just like see everywhere, and they're not horrible. Like they don't need to be dealt with immediately, but there are things that like need to be dealt with immediately. Anyway, and then also this is an example of what I was saying about like vegetation is good, but it can turn into like this situation where it's, this is kind of, it's like a little too much where it's starting to choke out the inlet. Like the water could be held back because there's just too much stuff blocking it. So it's just, this was definitely a wetter basin. This was also in Hamilton. And then really critical, if you like only really good at maintaining one part, probably the outlet control structure is like one of the most critical parts, because that's what really is like slowing down all the water in the basin. Aside from the, geometry of the basin, that's like the drain on your sink or the drain on your tub. Like if it's clogged, the water is going to back up. And if it's something clogged inside of it, it's going to cause, again, not allow it to drain correctly. So this picture, I don't know if you can even see it, right here, that's the low flow, like that it's barely, the water can barely get to it because of the lawn clippings. And this is another one where like, you're just maintenance guy can just go sweep that stuff out and kind of make a note not to do that. It does look like the water level here, but I'll show you some other photos of that. But the outlet, identify it, find it, know where it is, and keep an eye on it. It's probably the most important, maybe the most important. And then this is another, is the outlet control structure that's bigger. And this one's filled with like sediment, and it's not to the, I've seen ones where it's like to the top, but so it's not like insanely bad, but it happened to be that there was no cover on this one, so you could clean it out. And I'll get to that next, talk about the covers and the trash racks and the trash. But again, like, if this is filled with like bottles and cans and things like that, if this is filled with dirt, if this is filled with vegetation, these things just need to be cleaned out so that they're working well. And then this one, same, this was an outlet control structure, but like a different type of, sedimentation and vegetation that's piling up in there. And this was an example of this one. I was curious where it had went or why it was taken. I have seen things where people take metal stuff, like if it's out in public. I'm not sure if that was the reason for this one, but I was also thinking it's possible they were trying to maintain it and they like took it off and didn't put it back on. So again, things to keep an eye out, but this gaping hole, things can get in there, like a tree branch, like a huge tree branch could go in there. And I'm sure you can see like here, the little trash racks are being maintained. So even if this is meant to function as like an emergency overflow, which it's not because of its elevation, it still needs like something to cover it, or garbage will get in there and other stuff will get in there. This is a contrasting example, like it's covered. So, that's like the same structure and has some of the same things going on, but it's covered. And like I was mentioning about the emergency overflow, it's like, this is an emergency overflow in a wet pond. An emergency overflow in a basin can be hard to find, because you got to think about like what, after it hits a certain elevation, where it would flow over. I'll just say I don't think that's something you automatically can just like see sometimes. But you know, if you can see it automatically, definitely keep it clean and not choked out with plants and stuff like that. And then I think this might be like last section, but the basin outfall. So when the basin leaves the outlet control structure, there's a pipe and the pipe goes somewhere. That's this. So this picture, you can't see it super well. It's kind of hidden, but that was the pipe from one of these basins. So again, is it eroding? Is there like tons of debris at the outfall? So at the outfall, you'll often see one of two things. So not like that photo where the stone was really nice and even and thick. You can see where it's digging away at the land from the water going too fast, or you can see where it's starting to pile up with sediment because it's like slow or it's filled with sediment. So you can see many different things. And again, like the pipe sometimes is like falling down. And I picked this picture because it was cool. But you do see trees grow up at outfalls. That was one thing I wanted to mention. So it's very common to see if things haven't been maintained, you often see a tree like right at the foot of an outfall. And that on the other side is more of like a roadway outfall, but you see how there's so much like vegetation and just like other stuff going on, like dead stuff. This would function better if it's cleaned up. And that was it for the inspection, but just want to switch gears and touch on some things Tim wanted us to mention. So inlets, and I'm talking about the inlets, like the catch basin, what you're seeing a picture of here. This has been required in general, but it's trickling down through the MS4 municipalities now. But you got to have the dump no waste label. And I'm going to flip real quick. Do you see the stickers here? If you don't have it, that has to be put on. So if you see these on your property, this might be something you could bring up to the township and work with them on it if it's not like your property. And this open type of design, this is an old thing you don't do anymore. And as you can see, it's like a lot of stuff can get in there. Like, see this can, it's going to be in there in the next storm. So that, the grates keep stuff out. Like I think the analogy of like your sink or your kitchen is really helpful. Like if you took your drain cover off your drain, like everything would get in there. And that would go to the rivers and affect the quality. So these are two examples of retrofitted ones. So you see where they like bolted on this thing, and then the sticker, it's not a sticker, there's like another term for it, but it says like dump no waste. It has a picture of the fish. These are like a lot of different kinds of grate covers you're seeing here. These ones are actually old. They're like, if you bike over this, you can get trapped in it. You're not really supposed to have these anymore, but more talking about them being covered. So they need to have like floatables, something to prevent floatables, things that float in water. You don't want them to go into the waterways. And lastly, this picture also has the sticker, but I bring up this picture because you can see that the water is like up to the inlet, and sometimes like overzealous landscaping or like mulch or like very fine types of things that are just like mounded and have nothing to hold them, like no stone barrier or something, can often cause these types of problems. So in terms of like preventative maintenance, just like be careful when you place something like this, like some type of like really soft type of soil. I think this might have been happening naturally. I'm just talking also about like generally speaking. You can also like protect the inlet by like putting stone before it, or like you need to secure the vegetation. Like this type of like really heavy, like dark, new looking soil filling up an inlet, it's not like I've never seen it. This wasn't the first time I ever saw it. So just something to keep in mind as a property owner, and like I said, with landscaping and maintenance. And one more, these two are like on the roadway and they're trenches that are filled up. So, and then this one here was like a building, and they were having like a lot of flooding problems, and they wanted to like figure out what was wrong with it. But one of the things was like their whole property, like every single thing was like silted, like really thick, heavy silt. So the trench was pretty deep. It was like pretty well designed for a pretty intense storm, but it didn't have any way to really go through. And actually they put a pump in there too, which there's no way that's going to work with the dirt in there. So filling up any type of like drainage structure with plants and dirt is not going to function the same way as it was designed. It will still actually let a little bit of water through, like it will soak through the dirt and the plants and go through, but not at the rate that you need it to. And I'm just going to throw in a few little things about that were updated that need to be done per community ordinance. So these will like trickle down to business owners, property owners. So one thing is herbicides. They're kind of trying to, I guess you could say, like crack down on people just like spraying to control vegetation. So you want to kind of like keep it light and maybe use more physical methods if you can. And I'm sure you've noticed the theme through what I've been saying is like there's too much vegetation and there's like not enough vegetation. So you got to kind of strike the balance there. This was like, this is like really overgrown. There's a lot of weeds here. And salt storage and removal, like leaving big clumps of salt or having like a very large stockpile of salt uncovered where every rainstorm, it's just washing into the waterway unnecessarily. They're trying to prevent this type of pollution because, like I said, stormwater, it's very developed. It really is adding a lot of pollution to the eventual waterways. And tree clearing, you are not supposed to be just like willy-nilly getting rid of like especially very large trees that are doing a lot to like absorb the water and hold the plants down. And I don't think I have a slide for this, but this was always like generally you're not supposed to do this, and you've probably seen signs for it in parks and stuff, but pet waste, like, and feeding wildlife like geese. So if you're feeding the geese are going to leave their waste, and that is a major source of pollution. So to stormwater. And then I'm going to hit on one quick thing, which I was going to put at the beginning, but I figured it's more of a like, just, it's like not super common, but these are pretty serious problems that you could have that would indicate that it's not normal stormwater. So normal stormwater is just rainwater. So and then it touches like the roadway, which has oils and it has things in it, but in general, it's just stormwater. So it should be mostly happening when it rains or immediately after it rains. So one thing, dry weather flow, like if it's completely dry and there's water like running in an inlet, sometimes it means that someone's like illegally connected, like something from their house or something. Again, these are kind of like rare cases, but if you hit them, they're kind of important and serious, and they a little bit more important than just, sweeping away some bottles. Sheen, if you see like a lot of oil, we all know oil spills are not good for the environment, but cars do leak oil, so a little tricky, but odd smell, sewage. In Hamilton Township, you should not have sewage in any stormwater drain, I don't believe. It's not a CSO, it's not like Hoboken or Jersey City where they're built that way. Like manure is a good example, I guess, too, because it's sewage, but it's like maybe if a farm isn't like maintaining something and it's like coming to your property. Color, it's kind of non-specific, but it should really just be like rainwater. It should be basically clear. So something really strange, like the red example, I think was like blood. And I'll get to that in the next page, but another one like floatables, like things related to sewage. So like toilet paper, a lot of sanitary items, something to do with like a business, like a concrete cutter, or like, these are all not common, but you can encounter them. And the high temperature again is kind of like something could be like a washing, like water shouldn't be like boiling hot in a storm drain. Like if you see that, there's something is not right. And then I'm just going to explain why those are important. It might also help you identify if something's wrong. So like everything on the left, bottles, cans, salt from roadways, fertilizers and pesticides that are like normal amounts, pet waste. These are all things that are kind of found in stormwater. But the other side, like butchery, tannery, auto shop, like these things it's like a heavy pollution, and it's not really like under the standard MS4. And I will give you one example that I actually did see in real life is like grease from like a restaurant. Very rare, and they usually have their own ways of dealing with it, but like, they could do something like, oh, let's just wash out the fryer in the back. And, there's like a layer of grease or something. Like that's not really good, and that shouldn't be in the drains. Maybe like paint, like things related to construction is another thing you see, like people being sloppy and not cleaning things up. They're just like, oh, I'm just, I got this can of paint. I'm just going to wash it out in the drain. And then it could like all over and mucking things up and killing things. And the last thing I'll say about this is actually like a trick slide. These are both natural. Pay attention to like your observations. So like the one on the right, that's biological foam. Like maybe, smell is very important. If that smell like Tide, like it's probably Tide, it's probably laundry detergent or something like that. It also doesn't really look like laundry detergent. I'm just using this as an example. That sheen is natural, but definitely I think any normal person would probably think it was oil. So that's all I had. And thank you so much again, Tim and Sam. And yeah, do you have any questions, or should I open up the chat and see if people have questions? Could chat them in if you have any. Oh, I don't see any. Oops.
Well, like Stella said, if there's any questions, you raise your hand or put them in the chat. Comments, concerns?
Good overview. Thank you. We'll take a look at our basin this afternoon.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And it's also good to just have, I found just, some of the terms that you use, outlet control structures, so that if there is a problem, kind of can speak the same language too, if there's a situation where we need something to be repaired. So that's helpful as well.
Sure. And if you own a basin, that's you can, that's what I was trying to empower you guys as much as you can. Like that was something Tim mentioned, like what can you guys be doing on your own? Like obviously, like I said, there's things you're going to hit, or you might need some type of like signature or something on something. And it can be, I was thinking about it this morning. It's like, kind of like when you go to the doctor, you want to go to the doctor and have them be like, you're great. So I'm trying to tell you how to get to that point without like having to do a million things and have a million, back and forth. Like more, you could just be maintaining it and keeping everything good. And then when you do need to do like fill out some form, everything is good to go. Did you have a question, Harry?
No.
Sorry, you unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh.
Anyone else? Stella, great job. Thank you for your time. I hope someone came away from this meeting with some more knowledge of the basins. I did. I learned a few things today. And seeing no more questions, I'm going to end the meeting. I want to thank everyone for attending. Look forward to seeing you on Friday for the last one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.